Welcome back to the podcast. You're tuning in to episode number 301 of Starting the Conversation. I'm your host, Alice Benham, and today I'm going to be having a juicy chat with you about my most recent and most successful launch I've ever had in my business of my new program, On It. Over the years on this podcast, I've done a number of these launch review episodes where I really bring you behind the scenes and unpack the numbers, what worked, what didn't, my marketing strategy, the lessons, not only because I think launches can look so shiny externally, and I always want to unpack the reality of that behind the scenes, but also because I think there is just so much power in reflecting on your action and really the lessons that you can take from that. So I know that for me personally, these episodes are such a great chance to think about, okay, what worked well, what didn't, what do I want to take from this into my marketing and my sales moving forwards? And I hope that it can do similar for your business and you can learn from my launches as much as you hopefully learn from your own. This episode is going to be split into a few sections. I'm going to talk about why this launch was such a success, because spoiler alert, yes, the numbers were the biggest numbers I've ever had in terms of signups and revenue, but it was also the most successful launch I've ever had in terms of a few other qualitative factors, which I don't always think people consider. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit more and share some of those juicy numbers with you, of course. I'm also going to share with you my marketing strategy for this launch, which is one that is very much tried and tested for me in my business. So I'm going to unpack the different elements that I used, what my timeline was. And then the core of this episode is going to be me unpacking the main 6 reflections I have around why this launch was a success. Over the last few weeks, I've spent time coming back to this launch and really trying to work out what was it that really helped make this my most successful launch ever. And as with most things, I don't think it was one element or one factor that made it such a success. I think it was a lot of different things working together. Also a lot of different things that I've really learned over the years in my business. If you've listened to past launch reflection episodes, you'll have hopefully heard me reflect on things in that I then brought into play in this launch. It's always nice to see when you're able to put those lessons into place. So that is what I'm going to be doing in today's episode. But before we dive into some of the numbers, I thought I should just give you a little bit more context on what On It is, in case you're not familiar, maybe you're new to my community, or maybe you just didn't see this launch at the end of last year. So to tell you about On It, first of all, it's my favorite thing I have ever launched. I wholeheartedly believe in it and love it. And I'm not saying I haven't believed in the things that I've launched before, but you know when something just feels so aligned? That is how On It feels to me. So to tell you more about it, it is a year-long program which really helps business owners to prioritize working on their businesses, not just in them. My work as a business strategist is really about helping people to step into their role as the CEO of their businesses. I really believe in the power of regularly spending time casting vision, setting quarterly goals, looking at our metrics, doing financial planning, doing exercises that really help us to audit parts of our businesses and have moments of reflection. I believe the more that we have time to work on, the more easeful and intentional our business growth feels. However, working on your business isn't always easy. What I've learned over the years is that it's not a case of business owners not wanting to work on their businesses. In fact, everyone I speak to knows the power of working on their business and wants to do it more. But first of all, it's really hard to make the time for it because it rarely feels urgent. No one asks you to do it. And second of all, even if you do sit down to work on your business, you don't always know what to do. You might just be sat with a blank notebook thinking like, okay, I'm ready to work on my business. What shall I do in this time? And so On It was really born out of a desire from my side to create a really simple solution to that problem. The concept for On It is simple. It is monthly gatherings where on the first Monday of every month we come together and I am really stepping into a role of facilitation. The On It calls are not about me teaching or telling people what to do. It's about me holding space and really facilitating people doing that work on. So for example, in our January call, everyone left that call with their vision for 2025 mapped out, with strategic quarterly goals for Q1, and also with an action plan in place. So we do the work in the calls. I'm there to say, okay, here's what we're going to do next. Here's a prompt, here's an exercise, here's a worksheet. And of course, there's natural accountability there from doing that, but there's also then that expert support. So people know that they're working on their businesses in an effective way. So that's the main concept for On It, is those monthly gatherings. And throughout the year, we touch on different topics like financial planning, looking at your marketing metrics, and checking in, of course, on those goals and your progress to make sure you're keeping the momentum up. Alongside those monthly calls, there's some kind of additional resources that people can tap into if and when they need them. We've got weekly co-working, there's different templates and worksheets and guided audios that I've created for people. But the concept is simple. It's pretty much like a gym membership, but for working on your business. And I have to say, Onnit has actually existed before. I haven't really said this yet, but many people that have been in my community for a number of years, or perhaps people that were in the first iteration of Onnit will know that this concept and this name is actually not brand new to my business. Back in 2020, I launched a program called Onnit. It was a very similar concept in terms of the fact that it was bringing people together to work on their business and really set goals and track progress, but it was a little bit different in terms of the way that it worked. And whilst people really loved it, it had a great impact and I enjoyed it, because I hadn't quite nailed the format, it just ended up not really feeling like a right fit for me, and it started to feel like there was a bit of friction in it. So I actually ran that first kind of iteration of Onnit for just over a year. I put it to bed, and then towards the end of last year, I then relaunched Onnit, or for many people who wouldn't have been in my community back in 2020, brought Onnit to life for the first time in their eyes, to then be launched for 2025. So back in November was the launch for Onnit. And as I said, it is the most successful launch I have ever had. In my 8-9 years of running a business, I don't want to know how many different things I have launched. This has been the most successful thing ever. And I say that not just because of the number of people that signed up and the revenue that it made, but also because of some other factors that I don't think people always consider. So let's begin by diving into some of the numbers and why this was my most successful launch to date. So let's start with the numbers, because I feel like that's what we all want to know. When anyone else is doing a launch, I'm always trying to work out how many people have signed up, how much money have you made? Now, it's not all about revenue, which I will mention within this segment, but hey, who doesn't love to know the numbers of other people's businesses? So to dive into those, the number of signups Onnit has had in total is 123. I find that number incredibly satisfying because it's 1, 2, 3. But I want to unpack that in a little bit more detail, because as you'll hear in a minute, the strategy that I had for the launch of Onnit was that we had a kind of opening promotional period where the price point was lower, and then the price point went up and doors were left open until the very beginning of January this year. So in that opening launch, in that first week of Onnit being available for people to join, we had 112 people sign up. So 112 people joined in the first week. And then if I can do some very quick maths, that means we then had 11 people joining between the end of November and the beginning of January. So lots of people signing up in the initial launch, and then a small handful of people coming in that kind of second wave, and then doors closed at the beginning of January this year in order for the program to then begin. So in total, we have 123 people locked into Onnit for the whole of 2025. And I have to say, as just a first reflection, that is way more than I was expecting. I had done some of the numbers in my head, and I had the number of 100 in the back of my head as kind of like my best goal. You know, I've often thought about the idea with launch goals of like good, better, and best. I know that's a concept that's very widely used. And I think about, you know, good, what's my minimum target? Better, what would I be really pleased with? And then like best, what's that real stretch goal? And because I hadn't launched Onnit in this way ever, and I really hadn't launched kind of a program like this ever before, I just didn't know what to expect. And so I had that number of kind of 100 signups in the back of my head of like, maybe by the beginning of January, we could get to 100. Like if I really did a big second push at the end of December, start of Jan, like maybe we could get to 100. And as I sit here and reflect on the fact that we had over 100 sign up just in that first week, like I really was blown away. And I don't say that lightly, that's really not me exaggerating at all. Like I was really shocked by how well this launch went. Now, when I reflect on why I think it went well, I'm like, oh, that kind of does make sense. But at the time, it's like, you don't know what to expect. And I have to be really careful with myself around my expectations. I'm someone who can have incredibly high expectations and then spend a lot of time being frustrated and disappointed. So I've done a lot of expectation managing for myself and kind of gone, okay, if we get to 50, like that's huge. Like, you know, 50 people in the program in terms of impact, also thinking about, you know, like my time being paid for, like that really was the number that I was like, that would feel really, really good. And it was in the first 24 hours of launch. I don't actually have the exact number. I should have for this episode. But in the first 24 hours, I'm pretty sure we had about 40 people sign up. And it was when we had like 40 signups in the first kind of 12 to 24 hours that I was like, oh, maybe this is going to go better than I was thinking. So then, of course, I started to think about my stretch year goals. And 100 was really the number. When I got there, I just was so pleased. So 123 signups to On It for 2025. I will be opening doors at every quarter throughout the year. So if you have FOMO, if you want to join us, keep an eye out. I'll leave a link to join the waitlist in the show notes, wherever you're listening or watching this episode. As a reminder, if you want to watch this on YouTube, I am being filmed right now and it's going to go up there. But yeah, doors will be opened again at the end of Q1 for Q2 onwards and so forth, every quarter throughout the year. So there'll be 3 more kind of doors open moments. So I'm interested to see what kind of numbers we end the year with. But yeah, 123 people signed up for the whole year, which is just incredible. And every time someone signed up, I just felt so excited for them, like really excited that they were going to spend the whole of 2025 prioritizing working on their business. Like that's just gold to me. Like that's what I love. I just love people prioritizing this stuff because I know how impactful it is. So that was kind of the numbers of signups. In terms of the revenue that it generated, I actually don't have the complete exact number because, as you'll hear in this episode, some people were affiliates. So I need to figure out like exactly what the amount of money is that I'm giving back to those affiliates to work out the additional revenue. But you can do some simple maths. The total revenue for this launch was over £70,000. Which is by far the biggest launch I've ever had. I think the biggest launch I'd had before this point was when I launched my marketing program for the first time, Stop Guessing, Start Growing. Must have been back in 2023, I want to say. It was at the end of 2023. And that I think generated just over 20,000. And I remember at the time thinking like, that is a huge amount of money. So this launch more than tripled the biggest launch I've ever had before. The reason that I say this is my most successful launch, not just in terms of the numbers, is because of the breakdown of what that revenue means for my business. Now, the nature of On It is that because it's yearly, I offered people a yearly payment plan. There were 2 ways that people could pay, either in full or over 12 months. Those are 2 quite dramatic different options. If my system would have allowed, I probably would have offered up like a quarterly payment because it was, do you want to pay like £500 to £600, or do you want to pay like £50 a month? Like that's 2 quite different options for people. I didn't charge people extra to pay over 12 months. I don't believe in that. Yeah, because I offered the 12-month payment plan, that is what the vast majority of people went for. I think in the end, about 10% of people opted to pay in full and the other 90% paid over a year. Now, the reason that is so impactful for me, and the reason that every time someone signed up over the 12 months, I was kind of like, yes, thank you, that's great. Don't get me wrong, I'll take money however it's coming in. But when people were signing up to that 12-month payment plan, that meant so much to me because what this launch has done for me is give me an incredible amount of financial stability for this year and a huge ability to forecast accurately. I have always done financial forecasting in my business. I've been running my business for long enough that I can somewhat predict, how much money I might generate from different things. My one-to-one is quite predictable in terms of being booked up, but everything always, ultimately is an unknown because that work isn't currently, billed for and there's not an invoice out for it. This is the first time ever in my business that I can say, I know how much money I'm going to make in September this year. Unless something goes dramatically wrong, I am very confident in the revenue that I've already secured for this year. And the benefit of that is obviously just initially some stability and peace, and it's just a nice feeling to have. But more than anything, what this launch has bought me, what that high revenue but spread across the year has bought me, is permission. Having secure income over the next 12 months has bought me so much permission to make some big decisions in my business. For years in my business, I've been wanting to carve out time to really invest in my content. I've wanted to say no to doing some things over the last few years. And I've noticed that money has always been the thing that's got sticky for me there. I've gone, but I should say yes to that because I don't know when I'm going to get another client opportunity come in. Or I should say yes to that opportunity because that could get me something and, I need to get the money in. Or I can't really, spend two days in a studio filming high quality content because what if a client wants me to work then? Or what if something comes up? Like everything kind of started to be going through this lens of like, but finances. And that's with, having like savings in my business and all of those things that help me to feel stable. It was still in the back of my head. And what I felt, even just in these first couple of weeks of January, is that I feel so much more permission to make those bigger decisions, to take a few more risks, to just like really choose intentionally this year, because there's some revenue that's already in the bank. To be fully transparent with you, the amount that Onnit is bringing in every month this year is enough to cover my salary as the business owner. I mean, that is huge. Don't get me wrong, the business has a lot of other expenses that Onnit income will not cover. So I unless I really cut back my business, I would still need to take on a few other things. But theoretically this year, I could just work 1 day a week and I could survive. And I don't even know that I fully, as I say that, even really take that in, because that just feels so huge. I feel incredibly privileged to be able to say that out loud. There's also something in me that also feels a bit like I don't deserve that, or that just feels a bit like too good to be true. But that's what Onnit's bought me. It's bought me a lot of headspace this year. And actually, I'm really excited to then use that opportunity to invest in the other things, to spend more time doing the stuff that maybe doesn't give me an immediate return on investment, to be even pickier about what I say yes to, because I don't necessarily need to just be saying yes to things because it's work and because it's money. Don't get me wrong, I'm already choosy about what I do, but at the end of the day, we're business owners. So if work comes in or there's an opportunity, sometimes it is just going, isn't it? Like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that because, financially it makes sense. I won't necessarily need to make decisions like that this year, which feels huge. So that is one of the biggest qualitative things that is so successful about this launch. Like, yes, it's made me a lot of money. And maybe in the past I would have thought, wow, if I had a launch that made that much, what would I buy? Like, I'd buy some big expensive thing. Actually, I'm like, wow, it's made me so much money. How can I use that money in a spread out way to really buy me other things, to buy me headspace, to buy me peace, to buy me, risky decisions? The other thing that has felt so successful about this launch qualitatively is how it felt for me. If you've listened to any of my other launch reflections, or you've seen me talk about online before how I feel about launching, especially courses and programs over the years have felt a bit sticky to me. I've never quite felt like I've found my flow with programs and courses. Don't get me wrong, everything I've launched in the past, I've believed in, and I've known it's impactful and it's always been tried and tested. But I've always had this slight feeling of like, pushing a boulder up a hill. It's just always felt like a little bit of hard work. It always just felt a bit stickier than I thought maybe it needed to be. I saw people around me launching programs and courses or whatever it might be, and they just seemed so aligned with the thing. They just seemed really, really passionate about it, and it almost seemed easy for them. And I've never really felt that before. And I think on reflection, it's because I don't know that my favorite thing to launch is something that's me teaching. Actually, I think what I really, really love is facilitating, and I'm really learning that's what I'm good at. Like, I'm really, really good at facilitating and holding space. And so I think for the first time ever, I was launching something that also I just felt so aligned with. And because of that, the launch felt really easeful. I'm not going to say it was easy. Like, I was working long days across that launch to get things done. It was a bit of a hustle, but it didn't feel hard. Does that make sense? Like, there was ease to it. I just felt like it was selling really easily. I didn't find myself feeling icky when I promoted it. I didn't find myself worrying or ever being too pushy about this, because I just so trusted in the concept and the messaging and in the impact of it. And so when I look at, the wins from this launch, yes, a lot of people have signed up. Yes, it made a lot of money. But really more than that, it's given me so much financial stability. It's given me then, because of that, the ability to make some big decisions. And it's also really given me peace within the launch. Like, I could easily look back, and I have in the past at launches, and gone, yeah, that made me a load of money, but like, I don't know that I enjoyed it. Like, was it worth it for the personal trade-off? Honestly, this is the biggest launch financially I've ever had. And I would confidently say it's also the best a launch has ever felt. So for all of those reasons, I am saying this is my most successful launch to date. And I hope I don't need to say that I'm not sharing any of that to brag or to show off. I really just share that to show what's possible. I really love when I understand other people's success, because it helps me to see what's possible and really dream bigger for myself. And also just to be honest and just go, yeah, that's what it did for me in my business. It's huge. I'm so grateful for it. And as I'm going to dive into this episode, that success was not accidental. There was a huge amount that went into that. So on that note, let me talk a bit more about the strategy behind this launch, what I did, what the plan was. Because I would say it was actually a very simple launch strategy. Whenever I teach launch strategy or talk about it with any of my clients, what I really think about is having two key phases to your launch. You've got your pre-launch phase and your during launch phase. And those two phases each have a clear goal. Your pre-launch phase is really about sowing seeds, getting people excited and laying the foundation. And then your during launch phase is really about driving conversion and making sure people really understand, the what, why, how, when of the thing that you are selling. Now, what I have come to learn over the years is that the impact of a launch is all coming from what you do in the pre-launch period. The amount of time that you spend, sowing the seeds, laying the foundation, getting people ready is really what dictates the success of launch. I think we sometimes think, a launch is like launch day onwards. Whereas actually I would say the biggest launch strategy is everything you do until launch day. And then launch day onwards is just about like reaping the rewards of that and just like picking up the success that you have already worked towards. So I kind of had those two key phases mapped out. I had about 10 to 14 days really intentionally in that pre-launch period. And I then had, as I said, a 7-day period where on it was open for people to join at the introductory price. I wanted to have a reason for people to kind of get in that first week. And I also wanted to thank the people that believed in this new concept and were really committing to it. So I launched it at that intro price. And then after 7 days, the price went up. And then, like I said, about a month later, the doors closed, ready for us to begin in January. In terms of the elements that I utilized within that, I used a waitlist and I used a free workshop. Those are two things that I've used a lot in my launches over the years. And I wanted to do both because I kind of knew that they would each have a place. So I used the waitlist whenever I was talking about the fact that I was working on something new and I was really excited about it. The people that are then like, I'm interested, tell me more, I don't want to miss out. I kind of drove them to sign up to the waitlist. And then I also had this free workshop that I hosted on launch day, which is actually something that I've done for quite a few of my launches and I find is really helpful if what I'm selling maybe needs a bit more context. I knew that On It was new. People hadn't seen this from me before. It's not a concept that I've seen done a lot. It's not quite as simple as like, it's a course to help you start a podcast, or it's a program to help you work on your systems. Like, it's a little bit different. And so I knew that if I could get people on a workshop to really understand the concept of working on your business and why it's key and how I can help them with that, it was probably going to help people to understand it better. So I hosted a free workshop on launch day that was called The 3 Habits that will set you up for your 2025 success. So I was basically explaining the key kind of method within On It is the AB method, where we spend time getting clarity, then we set goals, and then we take action. So I kind of worked out, right, how can I turn this into a workshop? How do I teach this? How do I make sure people get it? Because people don't buy the solution unless they understand why that solution is right for them and for their businesses. So that workshop was really kind of teaching the method and the concept behind On It. And if people came to that workshop, hopefully they can agree with me that like 95% of that workshop was me teaching, giving away free expertise. And what I just did at the very start and the end of that workshop was introduce On It. So people on that call kind of got a first look. I answered a couple of questions at the end, and then that was kind of the moment that On It was launched, and I then promoted it for that next week at the introductory price. Like I said, I ended up from an email perspective merging both the waitlist and those that had signed up to the free workshop. So they kind of became the same segment, but people had those two ways of kind of joining my email list. So really the strategy was just, in the pre-launch period, sign up to the workshop, sign up to the waitlist, something coming, sign up to this free thing, talking about the concept of working on. And then in the sales period, I was talking a lot more about what On It was, and of course that offer ending towards the end of that 7-day period. So now you've got some context on what my kind of launch strategy was. And as you can hear, it was actually a very simple one. I want to dive into some of my key reflections of what I think made it such a successful launch. Before I do that, I just want to give you a bit of an inside knowledge about this launch, which I wasn't planning to share. It's not actually in my notes, but just as I'm talking, I'm remembering what that period in my business was like. And I'm like, I just feel like I need to give you guys a bit of a kind of, I guess, reality moment here that this launch very nearly didn't happen. I actually was having a rough time in my business just before this launch. To give you a bit of backstory, I host Christmas parties for business owners called Small Business. They happen in December, obviously. And it was at this point we were just having some stress about small business. Some of the tickets weren't quite selling as I'd hoped. just a lot of the elements, like pulling together 3 events across 3 cities in a week is not easy. And there was a lot just going on and taking up my headspace, to the point where I was like, I don't know if I have the headspace to do this launch for On It. I don't know that I can give this all I've got. And the On It launch kind of in my diary just kept creeping, forwards and forwards. When you put something in your diary and then you just keep moving it and you're like, is this ever going to happen? And I knew I obviously had the deadline of launching it before the end of the year, but I also had this deadline in my head of wanting to launch it before December. Because I know that in December, people are kind of heads down. There's a lot of marketing noise, but also because I knew that I was going to be hosting these Christmas parties in December. So I wasn't going to be very present. So it kind of got to like last chance, like it's now or never. Like I cannot keep pushing this launch back. Like I need to launch it now or not at all. And I say that just to give you, I guess, a bit of context of like, it was a little bit chaotic behind the scenes. I literally set up that free workshop about 20 minutes after coming up with the idea. I was always a day ahead with my content. That's like my minimum boundary in a launch, is I don't post things live. Everything's at least scheduled a day in advance. But when I tell you that I would like at 6 a.m. schedule the next day, get on with my working day and then do the next thing, like this launch wasn't super pretty behind the scenes. And I guess I just share that to give you a more honest look at it, and also to share that like you can sometimes make some of key mistakes. Like I wasn't super organized. I didn't have the timelines in months before, and it was still my most successful launch ever, because I think of these elements I'm about to talk to you about. None of these things are about like having a rigid timeline and perfectly sticking to it. Like I still let myself actually work in a way that's very me, which is being quite responsive and reactive and flexing. And ultimately, I think the success of the launch came down to these elements that I'm about to talk to you about, not, me being like perfectly planned and zen and organized. Although, of course, that's the ideal. And for this year, I have much better plans in place to make sure it doesn't feel so last minute. But yeah, I just wanted to share that little nugget with you because I feel like it's more context and honesty before I dive into the lessons. On the lessons, the first thing that I feel made this launch so successful is that I asked for feedback and I created something that people genuinely wanted and needed. I know that sounds so simple, but I think sometimes when we're launching, we forget the success of a launch doesn't really come down to any marketing activity. It comes down to the thing that you are launching. If you are like incredible at marketing, maybe you can launch something once and the thing be rubbish, but the launch go well because you're just so great at marketing. But that's like that's a one-time approach, because the second then people are in that thing and it's not working for them, more people, they're not going to spread the word. You won't have testimonials or case studies. People aren't going to join. So really the heart of a successful launch is what you're launching. And I think in order for people to buy, they've got to get it. They've got to understand it. They've got to want it. They've got to see it and think, yeah, that solves a problem for me, or that meets a need that I have. Now, when I look at the concept for On It, I can see years of learning in that concept. I have spent, must be about 6-7 years now, teaching people that A/B method, right? How to set your vision, how to set goals, how to create an action plan. It's something that I have spent hundreds, maybe even over 1,000 hours, teaching and supporting. And what I've done in doing that is really learned what people need and what people want, and how I give them the best solution for them. As I said, earlier on in this episode, On It has actually existed before. And I learned a huge amount from that kind of first iteration, not just about what worked, but also what didn't. The reflections around what didn't work about that first version of On It was so valuable to me in creating this one, because I was then so confident that what I was creating wasn't just going to be a good fit in terms of the idea, but also in terms of the format. I've spent many, many hours delivering workshops on the individual topics that are within On It. And from that, there's so much learning for me of like how to be a good facilitator. What do people really need and want? How do people feel about this concept of working on their business? For so many reasons, I was able to create something that I was just so confident meted a need. And one of the big things that I also did to help with that was I asked for feedback. On It actually kind of sparked in my brain, it kind of came back to me as an idea when I realized last year that so many people were coming to all of my quarterly planning workshops. For a few years in my business, I've always hosted a quarterly workshop that helps people set their goals for the next quarter. Whilst, people sign up to them one at a time, I was realizing the same people are signing up to these things. There was a handful of people that had come to 5 workshops with me last year. They did the January one, Q2, mid-year, Q3, Q4, and the end of year reflection. And I was like, these people have basically built their own little version of On It. You know, I've not set this up, but they've come to every single one. They've built this year-long kind of program for themselves in coming to multiple workshops. So I kind of created something that modeled their behavior already. I wasn't saying like, hey, here's something that you've never thought you might need before. I actually just went, well, here's what you're already doing. How can I create something that's going to meet that need? Like, I'm noticing people are doing this, that they clearly want momentum. How can I create something that gives them that momentum? So they don't have to sign up to 5 workshops individually, but maybe I just help them have it in one package. So I really created the idea based on people's action and the evidence of that. And then, as I said, I really asked for feedback from those people. So I actually emailed all of those people and I said, hey, you know, I've got this idea for this program. You've actually helped to inspire it. Do you want to give me some feedback on it? And I set up a form and I just shared the idea at the time. And I just asked, you know, what do you think? What could I add? And the feedback was so valuable. Some of the feedback really helped me to change the offer. But some of the feedback also just helped me to cement what I wanted the offer to be. You know, some people gave the feedback of like, I wouldn't want it to be so, you know, lots of people, small price point, like I want to pay you thousands and there only be a handful of people in there. And I was like, that's really helpful feedback because that helps me question, is that what I want? Do I think that's the best thing for On It? So that feedback was so valuable. And in exchange for that feedback, they then got a discount and some bonuses if they were to sign up as well. So it felt like a kind of good exchange. And yeah, just having that feedback, knowing that I was creating it from a place of evidence, I think is one of the biggest reasons that launch felt so aligned for me because I just felt so confident in it. I really didn't feel like I was selling something because I knew the impact. I knew this work had helped people before, and I had that kind of live feedback of the concept itself. Don't get me wrong, I was still incredibly relieved on launch day when like new people got it and signed up. Like it just meant so much to know that people kind of understood it, that the concept landed. But that I think is the first and biggest thing that made this a success, is that I asked for feedback and I created something that I knew people actually wanted and needed. That kind of leads me really nicely actually into the second reflection of what I think helped make this such a successful launch, which kind of links to what I was just saying then of being so relieved that people got it, is that I think one of the reasons this launched so well is because the concept was so simple. So simple to the point where I had a few moments of, is it too simple? Tempting to create something, a program, a course, a product, whatever, and just throw everything at it. Be like, right, what are all of my ideas of what this could include and involve, and let me just mash that together. And whilst that can make us feel like we're doing our job and giving everything away and offering people all the help, you know, we possibly could, it's very rarely actually helpful for other people, because people, when they get overwhelmed, they don't take action. When people get overwhelmed, they often then, you know, tap out. And I wanted to create something that just felt so simple, not just because I wanted, you know, to create something that felt that way, but primarily because I wanted people to just be able to do it. I didn't want to create this program that was so full of bells and whistles and this and that, and you can do that, and there's this as well that people are overwhelmed by. I just wanted people to be like, I get it. And it really is a simple product, like monthly gatherings. That is the core of On It. There's then a couple of things alongside that, some resources and weekly co-working. They're completely optional. If you don't use them, that doesn't mean you haven't used the program well. The core of the program is these monthly sessions where I facilitate working on your business. That's it. There's a lot of things that I could have added to that concept. I could have added in a community. I could have added in meetups. I could have added in one-to-ones with me. I could have added in group coaching. I could have added in much more teaching. You know, I could have added in bonus courses about marketing or operations or your business model. And whilst, yes, some people might have found those things valuable, it could have also led to an offer that just was too much and therefore wasn't clear. The simplicity of the concept in On It, I think, was part of the magic, because it was so easy for people to get and so easy for people to think, do I need this or not? You know, thousands of people in my community did not sign up to On It. And what I hope is that some of those people didn't sign up because they looked at it, they understood it, and therefore they were able to make a really informed decision about whether it was what they needed or not. I didn't want to just create something that was busy. I wanted to create something that was really intentional and met that need in a simple of a way as possible. Don't get me wrong, there were moments, like I said, where I worried, like, is it too simple? Are people going to feel like I'm overcharging for this? And actually it was so comforting to then get feedback once it was launched of like, oh, this feels so accessible. Like, I can't believe the price point. And I was like, oh, so interesting, isn't it? Those assumptions that we make. So that's really my second reflection. What helped it work so well is I let it be simple. I really drilled down on like, sum it up in one sentence. What is this? And reminding myself that I can always add things in. I really battled with, do I create a community? Like, do I have a Slack group or a Facebook group? And it just got to the point where I realized like, I don't think it's right, but hey, I'll launch it without it. And if I want to add it, I always can. It's way better to start simple and then you can always add and evolve over time. So that's my second reflection. My third reflection of what I think made this such a successful launch is one that if you are maybe early days in your business may not be super useful for you, but feels honest for me of what I think really helped this work, is that I feel like I pre-launched this program for years. Now, as I said in my kind of strategy for this, I had like 10 to 14 days before the launch day where I was like intentionally pre-launching. That was when I was driving people to the waitlist to sign up for that free workshop. And I was much more intentionally talking about working on your business. So yes, I technically pre-launched for 10 to 14 days. However, I have spent years talking about this stuff because this is what I do one-to-one, because I do this in workshops, because I do this, when I speak on stages. I have talked for years about the concept of working on your business. I have sown a lot of seeds in people's minds around what working on your business means, why it's so important. I have hopefully, I'm not even going to say hopefully, I have, put in a lot of reps that solidify me in people's minds as an expert in this area. That meant that when I came to launch, it wasn't just about what I'd done in that 10 to 14 day pre-launch period that really made an impact. It was also all of that action I'd taken over the years that I think meant that so many people were like, yeah, this is it, I'm ready. The feedback I got a lot in launch was people saying like, I've been waiting for something like this from you. I haven't been a right fit for your one-to-one. Your workshops have kind of given me a piece of this, but I've never felt like you've launched something that's really what I want from you. And I think this was exactly that. So many people, I think, saw it and went, yes, I've been following this woman for a while, but she's never sold anything that really gives me this solution. So yes, this launch was a bit chaotic and I could have done more pre-launch, but I think part of the success was that I probably could have done even less pre-launch because there'd been years and years and years of pre-launch, technically. I think the lesson that we can take from that is that the less you pivot, the deeper the foundations you build. I have for years been banging the same drum. And don't get me wrong, I'm always looking at ways that I can get more specific with that and improve that message. But I think there can be a temptation in business to evolve all the time. And the reality is if you're sowing the same seeds for years and years and years, you can then be reaping those rewards and the benefits a long, long time in the future. So whilst I've sometimes felt like, gosh, I'm still talking about the same things, this is a bit boring, or do I need to mix this up and start talking about something completely different? It's actually there is power in that, because it means that I'm really building that foundation that I think this launch really benefited from. So yeah, that's kind of my third reflection. I feel like I pre-launched for a very, very, very long time, and so many people in my community were kind of ready and waiting for this without realizing it because of all that past action that I'd put in, the content I put out, and really the positioning that I'd created for myself. I think it also helped that in the past, really the only other version of this was one-to-one, and doing this stuff one-to-one is not accessible for many business owners and not a right fit. And so I think for a lot of people, it was there's just never been anything that really gives them this impact in that format. Moving on then, the fourth thing that I think made this launch such a success was really down to the marketing strategy I had, which I felt was a very simple one and is one that I recommend many people test and try if it works well for you, which is using social media as step one and email as step two. If we're going to bring in some marketing words here, I use social media to really drive visibility and kind of nudge people to my emails, and then I use the emails to convert. Email is the best place to sell. in my opinion. Hands down, when I look at the data and like what drove conversion, emails are the top spot every single time. Obviously on socials, you can't see such a direct return on investment of like, oh, I posted that and that made me this many sales. But when I look at like the times that people were signing up, it doesn't link up with when I did social media posts. It lines up with when I sent emails. And that is a strategy I've used for years. And if anything, I'm just leaning into it every single launch that I do more and more, in terms of, email holding a heavier responsibility. I'd be really interested in the future to trial a launch which is purely email to do the selling. And I actually feel that could still be really successful, because even if I take as an example for you, over Christmas and at the start of New Year, I'd scheduled a few emails to just say, hey, like Onnit's about to close its doors. Are you sure you don't want to join? And we had like 5 people sign up on that final day. And I didn't post about it on social media because I hadn't come back after my break. Just an email generated 5 people signing up, which is like over £3,000 for the Onnit launch. So even just as an example, like there was no social attached to that. I haven't shown up for weeks. That one email drove that conversion. And I saw that in the whole of the launch, right? Every single email that I sent was really where I was driving that conversion for people. And I kind of think of it like fish in a pond. Some people might have heard me say this analogy before. When I was posting on social media, what I was thinking about was like, how do I feed the fish? Like, how do I give people something to think about in terms of working on their business? How do I give away some free expertise? How do I connect people to me? How do I like build this relationship? How do I bring the fish closer to me in the pond? And then email was really where I was like putting in my net and being like, right, any fish want to jump in? Anyone want to come to the Onnit pond over here? Weird analogy, but that's kind of how I use the two together. And I obviously had a few other elements in the mix. I used affiliates. I had this podcast, which I'll talk about affiliates in a minute, but really that combination of social is step 1, email is step 2, I think was really powerful. And as I said, that's the strategy I've used many, many times. That's really my sales strategy is that buyer's journey. This launch, I really stepped into email to a whole nother level. I am a bit of a nerd when it comes to email marketing. And in this launch, I did a lot of work around segmenting. So what that is not just having, this one big list, but understanding the smaller groups within that. So I have my big email list with a few thousand people on it, but really the main people that I promoted on it to was my smaller list, which was the people that had joined the wait list and the people that came to that free workshop. But what I did in this launch was also go even deeper than that. So if you opened any of my launch emails, you were then added to another segment. If you clicked on things in those emails, you were added to another segment. It's kind of creepy when you think about it, but I was able to see like who is really interested, who is clicking on multiple emails. And then what that meant was I was able to send more sales emails to those people. So to give an example of this, on the final day of my launch, I sent, I think it must have been like, if you were really, really interested in it on it, you got maybe 4 emails. If you hadn't shown any interest, you just got 1. So I really personalized the number of sales emails I was sending based on the people's interest. And I also always gave people an opportunity to opt out of that. So there was always a very visible way at the bottom of the emails for people to say, I don't want to hear about Onnit, stop telling me about it, which I think is a really important thing to do. Also stops people unsubscribing from your whole list. Instead, they just unsubscribe from that launch, from that segment. But I think that was really powerful. That also made me feel a lot less icky about sending any sales emails, because I was kind of like, well, I'm only really sending this stuff to the people that I know are interested. And that feeling of kind of consent and people wanting what I'm sending, I just think makes selling feel much better. So that's kind of my 4th reflection, is I think that combo of social and email and stepping into segmenting even more made it really effective. And like I said, I'm definitely going to test with one of the doors open this year, just using email, like no social at all. I'll drive people to a wait list, and then when launch day begins, social stops. And I'd just be interested to see how the results change, if any, just by having email in place. Because my assumption based on the data so far is that when it comes to conversion, email really is the heavy lifter. So that was my 4th reflection. My 5th and penultimate reflection, this is a long episode, but I just wanted to share all of my thoughts and feelings with you. And I know these episodes always go down really well, so I didn't want to miss anything out, is that I also experimented with this launch with a shorter sales period. And I think this was something that, I don't know, maybe didn't make it more successful in terms of the numbers, but definitely made it a better experience for me. So the kind of period I'm talking about here is from the day that doors open, from the day you begin selling to the end point, whether that means that it's no longer on sale or whether that's because the discount ends like it was for me. In the past, I've experimented with anywhere between kind of 10 and 14 days for that period. And if you've listened to any of my past launch reflections, you'll have heard me talk about the kind of dip in the middle, right? In most launches, 10 to 14 days or longer especially, you are going to see a dip in the middle. You're going to see a peak of interest and sales at the start, a peak of interest and sales at the end, and then there's this middle bit, which can be really tricky for you as the business owner. It can be the point where you panic a bit. It can be quite disconcerting. It can make you, worry. Is it going well? Should I just quit? And something I have been experimenting with across a lot of recent launches is when I make that middle period shorter, like when I make the sales period shorter, does that negatively affect the results? Now, obviously I cannot do a split test. I didn't do an on-it launch that had a 14-day open period. So I don't know, maybe I would have got some more signups, but what I can reflect on that felt different is that only having doors open with the sale for 7 days definitely made it easier. I felt like I had energy the whole way through the launch. I didn't experience as much of a dip in the middle. In fact, sales still stayed quite consistent. There actually wasn't a single day when no one signed up, which I don't think I've ever had before. I think every program or course I've ever launched before, there's been at least one day in the middle with no signups, which can be a bit disconcerting, but it's really normal, especially with a longer sales period. But I think because I did 7 days, people didn't necessarily have that dip, so there wasn't that dip in sales, and then because of that, I didn't feel that dip. Like I felt really energized the whole way through, and it didn't feel like it dragged for me. So I really enjoyed having that shorter launch period, and again, experimentation, I'd be interested to push it even shorter, 5 days, 3 days. I'm sure that there is this kind of equilibrium point where then the results do start to go down because you're not giving people enough time to really go through the buyer's journey and think about what you're selling. But yeah, that's kind of my fifth reflection, is I do think that helped, and there was still a very big peak at the start and at the end. Don't get me wrong, my sales rhythm was still very much a kind of dip in the middle, but it wasn't a dip to zero, if that makes sense. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll have just seen some interesting hand motions to explain that one. So that's my fifth reflection. And then my sixth and final reflection that I just wanted to touch on is that with this launch, I also experimented with affiliates, and affiliate sales actually ended up being about 10 to 15% of the final signups that I had. Now, I have experimented with affiliate sales a little bit in the past. It's not something I've really done a lot with. I don't have anything against working with affiliates. Obviously I did it in this launch, but it's just never been something that I've very intentionally done. And in fact, I didn't really expect it to play a role in this launch either. I just realized the system that I use offers up affiliates in a really simple way. I wouldn't have to manually sign people up. I could literally just share a link and be like, hey, if you want to share, here's how. So what I did was I just added to the kind of course portal this link that was like, want to share the word, be an affiliate. And so once people signed up to On It and they, looked at all of the welcome videos and resources, that link was there. And like I said, I didn't really expect anyone to do anything with it, but slowly but surely there started to be affiliate sales coming in. And I was like, oh, interesting that people are proactively signing up to be an affiliate just from seeing it once they've signed up to On It. And B, they're using it and people are signing up with it. I saw a few people, tag me in stories and posts talking about their affiliate link. And it was really cool to see, because I was like, that's, the power of affiliates is that I'd like to think they weren't doing it just for the kind of monetary kickback for them. I gave them 25% of the sale that was made. So it was, I'd hope, would feel to them quite a kind of significant and nice amount of money to get back. However, I do feel that they were really authentically talking about it and actually just sharing it because they were excited about it and they loved it. Now, obviously the data that I don't have is would those people have signed up anyway. If I wanted to, I could look at everyone that signed up through an affiliate link. Were they on my email list? Did they already play a role in my buyer's journey and then they just bought through someone else? Or are they brand new to me and they signed up to On It, completely cold because of that affiliate? Obviously the latter is more what I want that affiliate link to be used for, but it was just cool to see. And yeah, my kind of sixth and final reflection there would be that affiliate sales did contribute to about 10 to 15% of the signups, and I would be interested to explore that as we go through this year. Hopefully as people engage in the On It program this year, there's going to be possibly 123 people there that really want to spread the word. And if each of those people just got one person to sign up, that's really powerful. So I'm going to be experimenting with that more this year. I feel like I've said a few things in this episode that I'm like, I'm going to experiment with that when I launch on it again this year. And I feel like I need to write these things down. Well, they are written down somewhere, but get them somewhere so I'm like, okay, things to experiment with. Because I feel like I'm going to experiment with affiliates, shortening the launch period, just using email. Yeah, maybe there's some other things, but every launch is an experiment. Every action you take is an experiment, and the learnings are so helpful. Yes, we learn a lot when something goes well, but I think we also learn when things don't go so well, and maybe don't give us the results that we want. And I definitely reflect on this launch and realize that the success of this launch has come from years of launching and testing and learning and reflecting and, you know, sharing episodes like this. So I hope you have found this episode valuable. I know it's been long, but please do let me know your thoughts and feelings. I'd love to hear what you think of what I've shared, if you resonate with any of these lessons, if anything from this has surprised you. One of the things I'm excited about of having these episodes over on YouTube is there's a comment section. So even if you've listened to this episode on Spotify or iTunes or wherever else, if you head to the link to my YouTube channel that's in the show notes, you can leave a comment so I can, you know, actually hear your thoughts back, and you can see what other people are thinking as well. So let me know how this episode has landed for you. My big conclusion, other than all the many conclusions I've shared within this episode, is I just feel very proud of this launch. Despite the fact that at times wasn't even going to do it, and I felt a bit disorganized in the moment, launching something that feels so aligned and is already, I think, having a really positive impact on the business owners in it is something I'm just really proud of. And for years, as I said, I felt like I've not really found my flow with courses and programs. And last year I actually retired every single one of my courses and programs to become pre-recorded because of that stickiness, because it just wasn't feeling right. And I feel like the launch of On It just gives me so much peace and headspace. And I just feel like everything makes a lot more sense now this thing is out there. And yeah, without getting too ahead of myself, I think I've found the thing. I think I've found the thing that I feel really, really passionate about, and I think hits that sweet spot of like, I love it. I think it's really good. It has a great impact. People get it. And most importantly, it's a joy to host. I am 6 weeks in to, well, not even 6 weeks, a month in to On It being hosted, and already it's a great community and there's great stuff happening within it. So yeah, if you are interested in joining On It later on this year, like I said, doors are going to open again at the end of this quarter. So in a couple of months' time, head to the show notes, get yourself on the wait list. If this episode has given you FOMO, then make sure you're on the wait list so you don't miss out. But that is it for another episode. Thank you for tuning in, whether you listened, whether you watched. I'd love to hear what you thought, and I'll be back with another episode next Tuesday. So subscribe or follow to the podcast wherever you are currently tuning in. I hope you have a good week.